You believe you are completely alone. The doors are locked. The curtains are drawn. Then you hear it, or a sound that proves you wrong. For most of human history, silence in the dark was a signal of safety. But sometimes, silence is simply the moment before the real fear begins. What happens when the quiet is broken and you realize the isolation you cherished was just an illusion? These are the stories of those who discovered they were not alone in the most terrifying way possible. It was a late Tuesday night in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio. Mark was house-sitting for his parents, who were on a 2-week cruise. The sprawling 2-story home, usually bustling with activity, was now eerily silent. Mark, a 22-year-old college student, was used to the noise of his dorm. Here, the silence was almost deafening. He was studying in the living room, the only light coming from a single lamp beside him, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. As the rest of the house was shrouded in darkness. Around 11 p.m., he heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping. It seemed to be coming from upstairs. He paused his reading, listening intently. Tap, tap, tap. It was slow, deliberate. Probably just the house settling, he thought. Old houses make strange noises. He tried to dismiss it, turning a page in his textbook, forcing his attention back to his work. But the sound persisted, a steady, patient rhythm that seemed to mock his attempts to ignore it. Finally, annoyed, he closed the book and walked to the bottom of the staircase. He called out, "Hello?" His voice was swallowed by the emptiness of the house. The tapping stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. He stood there for a full minute, listening. Nothing. Just the low hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Shaking his head, he decided it must have been a branch tapping against a window. He went back to the couch, but the unsettling feeling lingered. About 20 minutes later, the tapping started again. This time, it was different. It wasn't coming from upstairs. It was coming from inside the living room. Tap, tap, tap. Mark's blood ran cold. He slowly scanned the room. The sound was coming from the far corner, near the grandfather clock that had been silent for years. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw it. A dark shape, crouched low to the ground. It wasn't a shadow. It was solid. His heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't move, couldn't scream. The shape slowly began to rise. It was tall, impossibly thin, and its limbs seemed to bend at unnatural angles. He still couldn't see a face, just a silhouette against the faint moonlight filtering through the window. The tapping sound returned, and he realized with a surge of pure terror what it was. It was the sound of a long, bony finger tapping against the wooden floor. Tap, tap, tap. Mark scrambled backward, his body finally responding to the instinct to flee. He knocked over the lamp, plunging the room into near-total darkness. He didn't wait to see what the figure would do. He bolted for the front door, fumbled with the lock, and burst out into the cold night air, not stopping until he was blocks away, gasping for breath under a streetlight.
Ow!
The police investigated. They found the front door wide open, the lamp overturned, but the house was empty. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. He told Mark it was probably a prank, or his imagination getting the better of him in the empty house. But Mark knew what he saw. He never spent another night there alone. The house was sold a year later. The new owners never reported anything unusual. But for Mark, the memory of that tapping and the thin figure rising from the shadows remains a constant, chilling reminder that sometimes you are not as alone as you think. Our next story comes from a forestry student named Clara, who was spending a summer in a remote fire lookout tower in the wilds of Montana. Her job was simple: watch for smoke, report any fires. For weeks, the only company she had were the birds, the wind, and the endless sea of trees. Isolation was profound, a solitude she initially found peaceful. Her tower was a small cabin perched on stilts, accessible only by a long, steep staircase. It was her sanctuary, miles from the nearest road or town. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, a strange feeling washed over her, a sense of being watched. She scanned the horizon with her binoculars, a routine she'd done 100 times. But this time, her eyes caught something. A flicker of movement in the dense woods below. It was gone as quickly as it appeared. It's an animal, she told herself. A deer? Or maybe a bear? It was a common sight. She logged the time in her journal, and tried to shake the uneasy feeling. Later that night, a storm rolled in. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled, making the tower sway gently. Clara was reading by the light of a lantern when she heard a loud thud against the floor beneath her feet. It was distinct from the sounds of the storm. It sounded like something had hit the underside of the cabin. Her heart skipped a beat. She sat up listening. Another thud, this time harder. It was coming directly from below. Her logical mind raced. A large branch could have been blown against the support beams. But the sound was too deliberate, too rhythmic. Thud. Pause. Thud. It was like someone was striking the floor from the outside. But who could be out there? She was dozens of miles from civilization, in the middle of a torrential storm. The staircase was her only way up or down. She crept to the trap door in the floor, the entrance to the tower, and made sure it was securely bolted. Her hands were trembling. The thudding continued, growing more insistent, more forceful. It was no branch. It was methodical. Then she heard a new sound, a scraping noise. It was moving along the underside of the tower, the sound of something dragging itself across the wooden beams. It slowly circled the cabin, a horrifying, grating sound that made the hairs on her arms stand up. Clara turned off her lantern, plunging the tower into darkness. She crawled to a window and peered down into the stormy night, but she could see nothing but rain and swirling darkness. The scraping stopped directly below the window. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the noise. She held her breath, listening for any sign of what was out there. Then, a low, guttural voice echoed up from the darkness, a voice that was barely human. It spoke a single word: down. Clara spent the rest of the night huddled in a corner, clutching a fire axe, listening to the storm and the terrifying silence from below. The sounds never returned. When dawn broke, she cautiously descended the stairs. There were no footprints, no signs of disturbance other than a few fallen branches from the storm. But on the underside of the tower floor, she found them. Long, deep gouges in the wood, as if something with claws had been trying to tear its way in. She packed her things and hiked out that morning, radioing in her resignation. She never returned. To this day, no one can explain the voice she heard or the marks left under the tower. She was supposed to be alone, a solitary guardian against the flames. Instead, she discovered that some things in the woods are far more dangerous than fire. The fear of being alone in the dark is primal. But the true horror is discovering that you were never alone to begin with. Sometimes they are just a stage, and we are merely waiting for the other actor to make their presence known. Is it just the house settling, or is it something else, waiting patiently in the dark, reminding you that you are not, and perhaps never were, truly alone?